Have you ever opened up your photo editor, had a photo in front of you and thought, I just don't know what to do here, how to start editing, what tools I should apply? Well, if that's happened to you, hopefully this video should help, because I'm going to provide a 9-step photo editing workflow or system that you can apply, not just to landscape photography, but any photo genre. So this should help you through that roadblock. Right, let's get into it. So I'm in my favorite photo editor, Luminar Neo, as you know. The first thing we want to do with any photo is activate Develop Raw. This is going to allow us to process our photo and get the fundamentals, the foundation of the edit rock solid. So in Luminar Neo, in Develop Raw, we have the ability to choose Auto Adjust. And Luminar is going to apply its best guess at taking our photo from the original to an improved version. So you can always use that as your Kickstarter. And using this approach to see where Luminar's taken you from and got you to is a pretty good way to start to understand what these sliders do. However, I prefer to build this up from the beginning myself. So the first thing you'd want to look at is the profile. And my recommendation is to find a camera matching profile, because usually the colors, the contrast, and everything about the base image is going to be improved using a camera matching profile. However, this is from a very, very old camera, the D700 from 2011. And as you can see, it's actually doing a much worse job using the camera matching profiles than using Luminar's default. So if you're in a pinch and you don't have access to your camera matching profiles, the Luminar default is a very good profile to start with. Now, the next thing we want to work on is the exposure. Is our photo too dark and we need to brighten it up? Or the opposite, it's too bright and we need to darken it down? Hopefully you nailed it in camera, but sometimes just a little tweak here can really make a big difference. If you feel your photo doesn't have enough contrast in it, you have access to the smart contrast slider, so you can improve the contrast. We can also control the highlights. So if we have areas that are overly bright, i.e. in the sun here, we can reduce those highlights. However, let's not forget, we're dealing with the sun here, so there is no way I'm going to recover those very brightest pixels, nor would I want to. In the shadows, sometimes just a little boost of the shadows can help to reintroduce information into those darker areas in your photo, and that's always a good thing to do at this starting point. We can always add more contrast to our photo later. However, if we don't start with information in the shadows and the highlights, we can't bring them back at a later date. When we're in Develop Raw, that is when we get our foundations of the edit all set up. We have access to the curves, which is a really super powerful tool, but I'm not going to go into that in this particular video. Let's just focus on the basics, such as color balance. So currently I'm as shot, so that is what the camera thought was the correct white balance when I took this photo. However, we have some presets such as daylight, which hasn't changed it too much. Cloudy is going to try and warm things up, because normally on a cloudy day, the color temperature is lower. But we can also, as you can see here, move the color temperature slider so that we can refine this exactly to our taste. We can also move the tint if we feel like it's too magenta or too green. We can shift that so that we get a more precise result. But the thing that we're aiming for during this Develop Raw stage is not something crazy like, oh, I want a really nice warm photo. This is not the place to do that. Here in Develop Raw, we want things to be color accurate, or as accurate as we can get them. If your photo is lacking saturation, now is the time to boost that up whilst we're in the Develop Raw section. It's better to do it here than it is later in Luminar's color tool down here. We want to get as much done in Develop Raw as possible. And the next thing we want to look at is sharpen and noise reduction. So these two kind of work hand in hand. So the sharpening algorithm, if I boost that all the way to 100, Luminar sharpening actually does a really good job. So if we look at the before and after, we get a much sharper result by boosting up that sharpening. But a consequence of boosting up sharpening is if there is noise in your image, you're going to add more of that digital noise, or you're going to make it more visible anyway. And so to counteract that, we can get the luminosity slider and boost that up. And as you can see, we can completely get rid of all of the noise in the photo. But with the settings as they are at the moment, we have completely taken away the life of the photo and made it into a very kind of washed out, painterly look. That's not what we're going for. So the key here is to set the sharpening to a point where we just start to introduce the level of sharpening that we want, and we're avoiding any halos around the objects. And I usually find somewhere around that halfway point is pretty good. And then we're bringing up the luminosity slider so that we're minimizing it, but we're not just getting rid of it completely and destroying the detail in our photo. So a limited amount of this noise reduction goes a long way. Now, while we're discussing digital noise reduction, those of you that use Luminar regularly will know that we have noiseless raw tools. So we can use AI to remove noise from our photo. Personally, I don't like to use it if I don't have to. If I have a particularly noisy file, then yeah, sure, I will run that. However, just because it's there doesn't mean I have to use it, and it takes time. Luminosity noise reduction, just using this standard non-AI model, usually does enough for me. So I'm pretty happy just to go with that. In the optics section, we're able to correct for any distortion of our lenses. So you can see that if I turn this off and then on, it's correcting for any barrel or pin cushioning in our lens. But personally, if I'm dealing with a landscape where there's no discernible geometry, i.e. no horizon line, there's no architecture, I don't actually need to turn that on. And I'm going to get a more authentic representation of the original photo without stretching or distorting any of my pixels that exist in the edge of the frame. So I'm just going to leave that off for this particular photo. And now if we look at the before and the after, you can see now we have a more contrasty image with a lot more detail in it. The color is actually much more accurate as well. But if you did feel like, oh, maybe we just want a little bit more warmth in it, not too much, that's not going to hurt things. So I am going to boost that up just a little bit. All right, before and after, we're good to move on. So now we've got the foundations of the edit locked in with that initial process. Now we want to decide exactly what it is we want to do with our photo. Now, this is going to come with a bit of practice, and the more photos that you look at and analyze, the easier this is going to get for you. But let me show you my approach to what I'm looking for when I'm analyzing a photo. So when I look around the frame, I'm looking for areas of interest in my photo, and I'm asking myself, what is important about this photo? What drew me to take this shot in the first place? And what do I want to showcase to my audience? So in this case, the first thing that sort of drew me here was this tree and the nice shadow here. I liked the light coming from our sun, which is a dominant part in the frame. And we've also got all of this lovely smoke that was being lit up by the sunshine coming through in the background as well. These are the key elements in my frame. And if I take a line from the sun down to the bottom left corner of the area of interest, encapsulate that tree and the shadow, come back up here, and then the sun up here, you can see that we've kind of got a triangular area of interest here. Everything that falls outside of the triangle, this is kind of merely incidental, and I've used that more as like a framing tool, areas of almost negative space encapsulating the more interesting area. And so now with that knowledge of saying these areas are less important around the outside and the area on the inside is more important, we can look for tools that are going to accentuate the area in here and diminish and push back the areas around the outside. And that's going to help to tell the story of what we found interesting in this photo. Now, there are many methods for bringing attention to areas in our photo, but one of the best tools for doing this in Luminar Neo is the very powerful Enhance AI. So 100%, this is a very aggressive edit over our entire photo. But with the knowledge that we just identified this area where we want to draw attention to, what we can do is mask in this area. So I'm just with a nice big brush painting a very rough triangular shape over that area. So now where I'd painted red, the Enhance AI tool is applied before and after. And now you can see that just by doing that, we've brought attention to the tree, to the sun, and to the cloudy smoke in the background as well. Enhance AI is a fantastic tool, but it is pretty crude. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that in. And also because I've created a mask around that triangle, what I'm going to do is jump into my masking section, the mask actions, and I'm going to copy that mask so that I can reuse it nice and quickly on any other tools that I want to apply. So the tool that I think would really help us in this instance is to add more detail in and around the background here, even around the tree, and that would be Structure AI. So I'm going to boost the amount nice and high again, and you can see that we have applied this over the whole photo. That's known as a global edit. What we want is a localized edit, something that's specific to an area. And that's where I'm going to come in with the mask. I'm going to paste the mask that we just copied. So if I show the mask, you can see this is what I painted just before. Gives us a really nice Kickstarter. So this is our before and our after. Again, pretty aggressive because I've set the adjustment to 100. We can reduce that, or what I prefer to do is leave it pretty strong so that I can have the full intensity where I really want it. And then I can just take it away with a 50% strength from areas where I feel like it's just a little bit too much. So I really don't want to draw attention to the clouds because they're already pretty contrasty, and probably not the grass area here either. But the smoke in the background, absolutely fair game. Before and after, before and after. So as well as drawing attention to certain areas, we can also reduce attention from other areas. So let me show you how we would do that. If I go to Structure AI, and rather than increasing the structure, we take it in the opposite direction. So we're softening things off. We can even boost that effect up even more. Before and after, got a very painterly look going on at the moment. Not really what we're after, but bear with me. What we're going to do is paste that mask. So again, we've masked that in around our triangular area. This time I'm going to invert that. So it's going in the opposite areas. Let me show you that mask. So now you can see the affected area, indicated by the red coloring, is around our area of interest. This mask is pretty crude. What I'm going to do is just sort of fill in the mask a little bit more where I want it, just over the sky, and just leaving the tree and the smoke in the background. And now I'm going to have this effect applied very subtly. If I put the mask strength at 80 and then I erase this mask, it's going to leave behind 20% of the effect we created. I know that's a small amount, but sometimes it's about just sort of applying effects with a little bit of subtlety. So here's our before. Oh no, I've closed that down. Let's go again. Here's our before and our after. Let's come right into those clouds at the top. Before and after. You can just see a softening off as I toggle the before and after. Like I say, super subtle, but sometimes it's these little subtleties that go a long way with your edit. Another really easy way to draw attention to one area and minimize another is with your very basic vignette. So let's just apply a little vignette here. Sometimes I like to push the amount all the way to -100 so it's really clear to see where it is, and also any changes that you're making to that vignette, they become very obvious indeed. Feathering is something that I usually like to put pretty high so that we get a nice soft transition. And where things are sat at the moment, I'm not happy at all. Don't worry, bear with me. Let's choose the subject. This allows us to click anywhere in our photo to become the new central point of that vignette. And what I want to do is split the difference between the sun and the tree, something like that. And now I'm just going to increase the size just so it's not encroaching too much. And now we're just going to bring that amount down just so it's a little bit more subtle. Before and after, before and after. Now this next step's really important, and it's about clearing the frame from visual clutter. If you've got little areas in your photo that are just distracting and catching the eye, now I'm not saying you should, but it's worthwhile considering whether your photo would benefit from getting rid of them. Let me show you what I mean. Right, let me jump to the erase tool again so that I can annotate this. So if we look down here, we've got a little bit of lens flare, and here as well, we've got a little bit up here, and even these clouds that are just sort of disappearing off up into the sky, they're just looking like a bit of visual clutter. I don't really like that, but certainly these lens flare elements, they need to go, and potentially these little bits just around the side of the frame, they may need cleaning up as well. So let me just close that down, and now let's actually erase those. Again, we have AI tools that can generate pixels and replace these areas. However, I like to work with a sense of speed and efficiency where possible. And for little elements like this, just using the basic erase tool does a perfect job. So all we need to do is just click over the areas we want to erase. So for example, we could get rid of this little bit here. And I strongly recommend just working in patches, okay? You don't want to try and do the whole thing all at once. You're not going to get a good result. So we can either use this erase tool just to clean things up like this. It's super quick, but it's just about looking around your frame and seeing if there's any areas that are just a little bit visually distracting, that don't add anything to the final image. And if that's the case, in my opinion, they're fair game to get rid of. Don't go changing things just for the sake of changing things. But if you think it benefits your photo to remove an element that isn't going to be there permanently, i.e. a passing cloud, I think it's fair game to get rid of it. How far you take it is entirely up to you. You can see that I'm working quite quickly here, just getting rid of some of these little cloud dots. Okay, and now if we toggle our before and our after with that tool, it's subtle, but it's a much cleaner image. You imagine having this printed on your wall, particularly those lens flare elements, they may really bug you over time, but a nice little cleanup makes it a much more satisfactory photo to look at. The next thing I'd recommend you do is look at sculpting the light. Are there areas of the photo that need to be brighter? Are there areas that need to be darker? Now, in the olden days, we would use dodge and burn. So dodge is a way to brighten up pixels. So you can see that I just painted a brighter area over there, and burn, or darken as it's written in the tool, is a way for us just to darken down areas. So we can just do a very quick brightening and darkening in our photo. That is one way to do it, but not the way that I'm going to do it in this particular edit. So I just want to throw that dodge and burn tool away, come back to my tools, and we are going to jump into the brand new light depth tool. I love this tool so much, and I know that a lot of you are loving this as well. If you don't see this, you do need to upgrade your Luminar Neo version, and if you haven't done that yet, I'll put a link to that in the description below, along with a discount code as well, because Sculpting are currently running a really good sale, and you can also save an additional 10% with my code as well. But this tool is included with that new upgrade, and you do need to get that upgrade pass if you want to get access to this. So here's our before and our after with the basic application, but let me show you some of the limitations, because as much as I like this tool, there are some issues with it. And the biggest one we can see over here on the left-hand side, the masking, particularly around things like trees. It can be really problematic for the AI at the moment, and it does struggle with those. But there are ways that we can minimize that effect. So you can see if I make this a tighter beam here, it's a more accentuated and really unusable result right there. But the opposite is also true. If we expand this, we get a softer transition zone. We also have the softness slider as well that can help to mitigate any edges and fringing. Also, I'm currently working at a very high amount. I don't recommend that. We are actually going to be much better off if we play this in with more subtlety. And the other thing we're able to do is combine this effect with masks. You can see that we also have access to all of Luminar's normal masking as well. So for example, let's say we set this up. We want a sort of warmer effect through the middle here where the sun would be hitting. We're going to darken down the foreground a little bit. Maybe we'll keep the sky a little bit darker too. We're able to change the color balance in the foreground and the background, so that allows us to introduce a bit more blue into the sky if we wanted to. We could introduce a little bit more warmth into the foreground. Many options with this tool, before and after. But my preference is to act with a little bit more subtlety. I'm just going heavy-handed so that you can kind of see the effect clearly on YouTube. But I'm just going to sort of paint that in only where I want it. You know, we may want to just darken up that top bit of sky because we have that darkening effect. And we also may want to just darken down the foreground as well. And if we have areas where we were seeing just a little bit of haloing, like around that tree, we can just dab away with our mask. And now it's not even noticeable. Before, after, so we've got the benefit of the tool without any of that haloing. Once we've sculpted the light, that's when we move on to what I consider to be special effects. So what are the special effects? Well, it's things that you're adding to the scene that are actually changing the look of the photo that was captured on your sensor. So for example, if I open up the landscape section and I come to Atmosphere AI, this is a way that we're able to add fog, mist, haze to our photo. Let's choose a little bit of haze. Again, push the amount very high so that we can clearly see what's going on. And you can see that we can let that fog kind of encroach over the foreground there. We could just have it as layered fog, so it's a little lower lying. Again, a lot of options. I like to work very heavy-handed at 100% so that I can clearly see how it's being set up. And if there are any issues, like again, the AI masking is struggling around this area here, I know about it. It's much harder to see that if I've only got this amount set at like 8%, which might be all I want. Any issues of whether I want things lighter or darker, how far I want it, it's so much easier to see with the amount at 100. I can then come in with my mask, have it in paint mode with a low strength, and now I can just sort of build this effect up only where I want it. Now this is what I'm talking about in terms of special effects, just adding extra elements to your photo that may not have been there in the first place. If you're not someone who is happy or comfortable to do that and you feel like, you know, I'm bastardizing reality for want of a better term, then just don't do this. But if you did want to do things like this, now is the time to do it. So for example, if we wanted to add some sun rays into the photo, we're going to do that at this point in our workflow. Obviously, we want to move those sun rays over to where the sun actually exists. And this is one of those tools that straight out of the box does not look good. So one of the keys here is making sure that this penetration slider, you might think that more penetration is a good thing, but no, you would be wrong in this case. We want to bring that down. So if we set that somewhere around 2, for example, before and after, we're starting to get this looking much more believable. Again, with the amount at 100, we can clearly see when we move the sun ray length exactly how far those rays of light are going. There are a lot of settings inside this tool to make sure this looks exactly the way you want it to, but I'm just going to focus on a couple. So the number of rays, you can get a nice soft ethereal look to your rays if you put the number of rays down at 0. Alternatively, we can put it at 100 and have lots of rays. The key now is to move this randomize slider to sit that at a point where you feel like you're getting the most bang for your buck in terms of where those rays are going. And what I want to do is have the rays, they're kind of going from the sun down towards the tree. You can see we've got these 3 nice fronds of light. Now, currently, again, this is way over the top. This isn't the look I want. I don't want light rays going off into the sky. I just want to sort of feather them in through the landscape here. So again, we can combine the look of the tool with a mask. And that's key. Like adding these masks in really can help you to finesse your work. So now I'm just painting lightly over that area before and after, super subtle. And this might be all I'm after. I'm going to go with another pass though, just for the sake of YouTube, just so that you guys can clearly see the addition of those light rays. There you go. So it's at this point in the workflow that we apply the creative effects. Once we've done that, we move on to global effects or global filters. So things that are going to change the look of the photo overall. Let me show you what I mean. So what sort of tool constitutes a global filter? Well, one of my favorites, for example, Mystical. It's the kind of thing, if I push this to 100, that I want to apply over the whole image. Again, not with 100%. I'm not crazy. Well, you might think I am, a little bit. But we just want to go a little bit of this over the whole photo. It's the kind of filters or tools, like the dramatic tool, that if we applied this in just one area, it's going to look really weird. So let me do that. For example, if I just put this over the tree here, you can see that it has a desaturating effect, and it's changing the look of an element of our photo in a way that just means it doesn't tie in anymore with the rest of the shot. Whereas if I were to apply this over the whole photo and this was our look, it's acceptable because the whole photo is changing based on this tool. So it's a hard thing to define exactly what I mean here, but hopefully you get the idea that it's something that you want to put over the whole photo as a wash, almost as if you're putting a filter, like a mist filter or a polarizing filter, over your camera lens, and it's applied to the whole photo. Do that during this stage of the workflow. We've covered a lot, but you may be wondering, what about color? Why haven't we done anything there yet? Well, we leave that until the end. And the reason is many of the tools that we apply in Luminar Neo, they actually work better if they're being applied to a full color image. It's the same with any photo editor. You have a red, green, and a blue channel. The more color information that you hand to a tool, the better the result that you're going to get back from it. So now we've got to this stage. Now we can alter the color if we want to. You can leave it there and say, I want a color accurate image. But if we want to warm things up or add a subtle color grade, now is the time to do it. Let me show you a couple of tools we can use. All right, so from a color point of view, we have the color tool, and this gives us a whole heap of control. At the very basic level, we can increase saturation or decrease saturation. But it's when we jump into the HSL, which stands for the hue, saturation, and luminance, this is where we have the most control. So luminance, which refers to brightness, allows us to talk into a specific color, and where that color exists, we can darken it down or brighten it up. And this gives us a lot of control over the final look of our photo. So I'm just going to darken down the sky a little bit, and that just gives these clouds a little bit more punch. Okay, what about the saturation? Well, if we felt like the blue was just getting a little bit too heavy-handed, we can just knock that back a little bit. Equally, if we wanted to just warm up the area where the sun is hitting down on the grass here, we can do that by grabbing the yellow and the green channel and just boosting those up. Usually, I find for things like foliage, surprisingly, it's not the green channel that you want to boost up, but it's actually the yellow channel that is going to give you a better result. One thing I often like to do with my work is give an overall color wash. Now, there's several ways you can do that in Luminar Neo. The toning tool is a great option that allows you to set a color for your highlights. So just like with many of these tools, I like to push the amount all the way to 100. So it's really clear to see exactly what color we're dialing in. And that way I can say, yeah, you know, I want a nice orangey tone there. And then we can switch the shadows, boost the saturation up on that. And again, just dial that in to a color that we want. Now, usually a complementary color scheme works really well. So if you're pushing oranges into the highlights, you'll balance that out with some blues in the shadow. You can grab the balance slider, which allows you to say, hey, I want more highlights or less highlights and more shadows. So the toning tool does give us a lot of control over our color grade. And just like with many tools, you don't want to go too heavy-handed with this. Just have it nice and high when you're setting it up, and then you can just bring it back to 0 and just sort of ease that in a little bit and just see where you're happy with. So a nice little warming effect in this area here, before and after. Yeah, that's quite nice. The lookup tables are also a really useful tool, and you find those in the mood tool here. It says choose LUT, lookup table, and there are some really nice color options in here. So again, we can crank the amount to 100, so it's really easy to see exactly what colors are being introduced with the different lookup tables. And then once you've found one that you like, so for example, if we liked Long Beach, then you can come in and play with these sliders, set it up exactly how you want it, and then play with that amount slider until you get the perfect look you're after, before and after. Personally, I'm finding those greens just a little bit too much, so you can always come back in with another addition of color, jump into the greens, pull the saturation down from there, and the yellow as well, just a little bit. And now if we jump to our before and after slider, we can see on the left-hand side, we have our original, and I'll bring this across and you can see our edit. Before and after. Let's do the full before and after. Before and after. Before and after. It's a pretty dramatic change and probably more heavy-handed than I would normally choose to go with. And if you find yourself in that situation as well, you can always just go back into the individual tools all the way back in the stack. And if you think that, well, the vignette tool was too much, you can just reduce that back. If you feel like the addition of the dramatic tool was too much, again, we can just ease that back a little bit. And when you go to the top of the stack again, the end result will just be re-rendered. And even if you want to create a black and white image, I would still recommend following this workflow because it's going to make your transition to a final black and white image so much easier. And don't forget, if you haven't got that light depth tool or auto adjust in your version of Luminar Neo, you need to get hold of that upgrade pass, and I'll put a link to that in the description below along with the discount code. Now pause the video and tell me in the comments below, what do you want to learn in Luminar Neo? And who knows, the next video could be dedicated to you. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.